Welcome, everybody. Glad you can join us. Hope everyone is doing really well out there. While we're waiting for some folks to join, just a few things that I want you guys to be aware of. We are recording this. It's live on LinkedIn. It's live on YouTube. So the recording will be up straight away as soon as we finish. And if you want to share it with your colleagues, feel free to do that, of course. What else? Yes, of course, mentioning YouTube. If you want, please go and subscribe to our channel. You can just search for Smart Building Series and you'll find it up there. And we also post like podcasts and stuff up there as well. So lots to see. And today, really happy to be joined by Jonathan McFarlane from PlaceOS. Hey, John.
Hey, James. Good to see you again.
Thanks. Good to see you. And thanks for coming and having a discussion with us today. We're going to be talking about AI, of course, and specifically large language models and how they're changing the way, how we think they're going to change the way that users interact with commercial building systems. And as John says, from point and click to describe and done. So that's what the conversation is going to be like today. We're going to show some slides. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the research we've done. John's going to talk about his experience with that and how he sees this whole thing playing out. And then it would be great to take some questions or even comments. Let's make this interactive. If you think we've totally missed the point, feel free to tell us. That's pretty much it. So if everyone's ready, let's crack on. So, as I said, some of the research that we've done recently. So, we published a study a couple of weeks ago on, basically we tried to map the landscape for AI solutions in commercial buildings. So, of the 361 companies that we identified who are actively promoting artificial intelligence as part of their solution. This is how we saw that break down by use case. So of course, companies are offering more than one use case, but some of the strongest things where we're seeing AI really being applied, like security and access control. So that would incorporate things like computer vision, space occupancy and people movement, and what we're going to be talking about today. Data integration and analytics. It's a big part of how AI is being used in this space. So what we're looking at here is just based on domain. We can actually drill down into that. As part of this research, we identified 66 different specific use cases, and that's what you can see here. So these are some of the what we would say most commonly served individual use cases. The top 10. So you can see here, out of that data integration and analytics piece, there are 3 there the specific use cases where we're seeing AI being applied. And data visualization is one of those. 22% of the companies that we identified were doing something in that space. And PlaceOS is one of those. So let's hear a little bit more from John.
Thanks, James. So I want to start with maybe one of the biggest misconceptions with AI and large language models, that it can help you with all of your data like magic. You can just connect it to your database and it will give you insights and tell you something useful. Well, in fact, it's really bad at that. The first step is really normalizing your data and getting it into a format that you can reference and have consistency across. And that's no easy feat. So we're actually lucky at PlaceOS that we started our journey as an integration platform, because normalizing data is the first step to being an integration automation platform. So all of the things we connect to, the building access control systems, HVAC, enterprise systems, Wi-Fi, endpoint sensors, we have hundreds of integrations in our library. And we normalize all of the data we're receiving to make it consistent and has the ability to cross-reference. And that's really important, because if you can cross-reference your integrations with AI, AI doesn't need the instructions on exactly how to do things. It can look at your APIs, which is a segue to the next slide, where we go. Here's just a screenshot of our Swagger documentation, just as an example that when we build solutions at PlaceOS, we're using APIs to do so, both front end and back end. And when in the old way of doing things, we would have to scope user requirements with the customer, have user stories, turn those into wireframes, prototype those in Figma, build an app that has all the interface elements, and then connect all of those interactions back to integrations to perform automation or receive data. That's many steps. The promise and the benefit of AI is it can look at your APIs directly, and it doesn't have to be hard-coded or specifically told how to do something. You're just saying what I want to achieve. It will look at your API documentation, your API functions, and be like, to achieve what you're asking me, I'm going to go through this method. And it's really interesting when you see AI showing it's working in a way when you integrate with ChatGPT as an example, and you ask it to give you status updates on what it's doing. When I first saw this with our ChatGPT plugin, it would sometimes get it wrong and then tell you, actually, I found a better way of doing it, and I'm doing that now. And you can see it's like connecting your integrations, your APIs together on the fly, meaning there's more possible actions available to you than what we would hard code in a more traditional user interface. So the user experience possibilities are compounding. It's any function of any normalized data that we're receiving. So my favorite graph is on the next slide, where it sort of visualizes this, and you can use this as a design guideline, a design tool. What experiences can benefit from this? And the one we started with is like the very low-hanging fruit, the obvious thing. The thing I hate most as an end user is filling in forms for booking rooms and desks in a workplace. I never do it myself. That's like the first, anything form related, I'll delegate to somebody else, or I'll rather interact with reception or concierge than have to fill in a form. So the top example is, let's say room searching. First, I'm putting in my requirements, which might be the time and how many people I need in the room. It gives me some results. I then go through the results and choose my favorite option. Then I might add additional things like catering. So there's two back and forth between human and computer interaction is many steps. And we're always trying to remove friction and automate as much as possible. And when it can't be automated, we want the interaction to be quick. And there's many ways to do that, not just with AI, but with conditional-based logic and context-aware user interfaces. We're not saying that the traditional user interface is being completely replaced. It still has a time and a place, including kiosks and touch panels and apps. But for any experience you can remove all these points, why not? So let's now we can just describe what we want. It skips all the back and forward, and it gets straight to the result. And it achieves that by looking at the functions available to it and performing those actions in real time in situ, which means you can put all of your information up front. Hey, I need a room for 6 people. It needs to be pet friendly. I need a nice view because I'm entertaining a VIP visitor and they've never been to Sydney, and I want to see the Opera House when I'm there. You can say all of these things and it will give you the result. That's just one example. So there's so many different user experiences you can apply that to. And I love this graph because it's a visual way of thinking about that. Let's go through all of our desired outcomes in this user experience, in this building, in this workplace, or any other tenancy of a building. and use that as the design guidelines and principles. So what's next? What can we do next? We can go through AI as an interface in so many different ways. So the more we connect to that room booking experience is one thing, the obvious thing. But the more we can connect to, the more context and the more things we can cross-reference in a chat experience. For us, this is no longer beta. We have a publicly available ChatGPT integration. We're working on a native integration into the Microsoft ecosystem with Copilot. So it means you don't have to use these forms, and let's get that out of the way. But it's obvious these types of experiences. What I'm really excited about is the next area of focus on the next slide, which is combining multimodal AI so we can have a more integrated experience that covers more than just replacing forms and removing friction from a user interface into the area I'm most passionate about, automation, and removing the need for user interface at all. This screenshot it's crude, but I like it because it tells a story. It's my co-founder's apartment in Manly, and he started training some computer vision to detect birds. You can see it knows that that's a table, that's a chair, and he has a side project on identifying invasive species in Australia, and he's working with his brother on some research on managing invasive species with computer vision. Now, we have also commercialized this model, so we have over 100 objects that we have trained on, which can now come back into our more standard practices of context awareness for space. So we're all familiar with occupancy-based automation and using people counting to trigger desired actions. But this can go one step further and give you context on what people are doing in that space for better analytics and for better automation. So, for example, we could detect if there's plates on the table that need cleaning because catering has delivered some food and beverage to a meeting room. Therefore, it can trigger a cleaning workflow event as one simple example. But this can go into most stakeholder groups. What are they interested in? What context are they most interested in that we can achieve with the combination of large language models, computer vision? And what I love about this is my personal background is in audio visual, and this niche knowledge I happen to have of AV is now being applied to user experience, because AV is the eyes and the ears of the building. So we can use sound and microphone arrays and steerable speaker arrays to have augmented reality and people tracking in different ways. Or I can just ask something of the large language models with my voice in any space if we have network-based audio-visual listening and watching. So that might sound creepy, but there's with anything useful, you might be willing to spend a bit of your privacy to receive a more frictionless user experience as an individual, or a more manageable building as an organization, and can lead to a whole range of positive outcomes, including environmental savings, and efficiency usually equals better results on your CO2 and money you're saving.
I saw an interesting application similar to that with video surveillance camera for in hospitals, where they'd incorporated a microphone, so then they could listen for different sounds from the patients, and then based on that understand if they were in need of help at that specific time as well. So again, it's a trade-off, right, between what your privacy expectations but there's, I think, like a clear use case for how it could benefit one particular industry.
There's certainly safety and workflows. So the different stakeholder groups are interested in different things, like cleaning are interested in dirty plates. Campus security is interested in maybe abandoned backpacks. And then, in aged care facilities, it could be more context on the patients in those rooms, and the experience they're receiving, and just like health monitoring for detection which you can do without having to have wearables. And we've started doing some work in aged care, and we know one of the main goals is for the patients to not feel like that their privacy is impacted, and having to wear something on their wrist for fraud detection. They want to feel independent. They're just because they're aging doesn't mean they're not people that can that don't want the same things that we all want, and independence and freedom is one of them. And in fact, like, this is the ironic thing about this technology that might seem like it's infringing on privacy or the perception of that, but in fact it can give people more freedom and more privacy in scenarios like that. And keep in mind that anything we're doing at PlaceOS and most people with computer vision is edge-based architecture, meaning we're not streaming video back to any video recording system, or we're not viewing the video. The video is only there to receive the data. So the processing for that can happen on a local device, and then it's just the data, the context that goes back to a centralized cloud server. So it's that's important, because it means I can't remote in and view video footage, but I can just see the data, and that can be managed in very secure ways rather than having to worry about that. So there's a lot of different elements to this, and I think one of the main things I wanted to discuss today was that it's all of these things combining. It's these multimodal AI, which is the computer vision, which gives you the input and the data, but then the large language models allows you to interact with the building in new ways, and as simple as replacing friction in forms, which sounds novel, but it sounds like it maybe not have the biggest impact, but it means we can focus on so many other things if we just remove that out of the way, and with the combination of automation as well. So it's not just the building itself can react to you with more traditional logic, and then if the building gets it wrong, you can interact with it much faster because you don't have to open an app and change things. You can just speak to the building. It's not far off that most buildings will have the infrastructure, because all of these things are sort of converging at the same time. Even things like Wi-Fi 7 and the density that allows in like stadiums, and so these experiences and tracking abilities of Wi-Fi infrastructure is aligning to support all of this as well. So it's like the perfect time to be in the integration game, because we can connect to all of these things and connect them together and literally make it like a multimodal by connecting to audio visual and repurposing it. And we started doing that with the likes of Cisco using their cameras for video conferencing, but for people counting. And that's pure logic, right? If there's 5 people in the room, that we can trigger actions based on that occupancy threshold. But now we just get this extra layer that there's 5 people in the room and 2 of them have laptops, and we can flag like that extra context for analytics and insights. So that's the last thing I wanted to have in this slide deck, to talk about how do we get these insights and how do we present them. And I think one of the opportunities with large language models when it comes to insights is going beyond just replacing the dashboard with a chat integration. I've seen a lot of examples of that, of quick responses that dashboard focused companies that have like a data product. They're like, oh yeah, we've now got ChatGPT integrated. But then when you look at what they're doing, it's just serving you the same results, but you're in some ways you've actually added extra layers, because you could have just gone to that dashboard, and now you're asking for something, and it delivers you to that particular graph or that data visualization. So for me, insights is not data visualization. Insights is what humans do, where we cross-reference things and use our own context. And one way you can start cross-referencing things with large language models is exposing your data to benchmarking, and that can be industry standards or any sort of white paper, or of course training your own models with your own data if you happen to have access to a lot of data that could be benchmark data, right? So so that cross-reference ability of this is what provides insights. Not
Mm.
It's not just delivering something we already had in a dashboard. And this is an area that is maybe the harder bit in some ways of AI, and that's why I've got it at the end here. The rest of it we already have off the shelf or soon to be released. But the insights part is where PlaceOS is actually partnering with university research and sponsoring research from universities, and we're extending this to the smart city. So we can look at the transition from transport systems to buildings, as an example, and really see the movement of people and the context of what people are doing. You can imagine if we expand some of the things I've already been discussing to the city, it can be related to transportation and the quality of the roads. Where are there potholes? How many trucks have come past versus cars? And that can trigger service requests with so like dynamic service requests. So you're not just repaving a road unnecessarily. So all of this technology is becoming more and more transferable, and that's been exciting for me personally to always be challenged by working in these broader spaces. I started my career in meeting room automation, and have been zooming out ever since. Right, so the computer vision and the AI and the large language models is making all of this transferable to lots of industry verticals. Even energy, we're starting to do work not just with energy clients for their workplace, but the production floors for safety workflows. So instead of, it's almost the inverse of why we're tracking people in other projects. We're usually looking at occupancy count, and when there's lots of people, we trigger actions. The safety workflows on the energy floor is if a person working in isolation has fallen over or we haven't seen movement for quite some time, we can trigger actions for safety related. So we can go check on that person because they are working in isolation, sometimes remotely. So there's so much we could break down there.
No, I mean, just following up on your point there about chatbots, and from our experience, having, we've implemented our own chatbot. I feel like perhaps there has been a lot of focus on that as now the user interface, and I think people then, because of that, you think of AI as a tool, as just that's the way that it works and interacts with, when actually, that's just, I think, the version of AI that we're seeing at this moment.
Yeah.
And like from my perspective anyway, like as an information company, I can see that, we're going from like these kind of, just siloed text-based PDFs and articles now to being much more of a data provider, right? Like being able, in the first instance, to access our data via a chatbot, but then also, in the future, just to become another API, right? A source of data, which then people can combine with other sources of data and their own data, and so I think, it is impacting so many different types of industry.
I think like a lot of breakthroughs in technology, at first we don't use it to its full potential. We just start using it in the same way we were using the old technology, and that's the starting point. And then we learn, what can this do that we couldn't do before? And in my mind, that's where we're at right now. People realizing that. For me, it's being blown away by the fact that it can just go to our API functions and work out that something I've asked for, it's using this particular function. Where a programmer, if they're writing that code, they may not necessarily know about that function and use that function, and that feature would not be available to the end user.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's writing code in real time to solve your problems. And that is such a big thing that we're only scratching the surface. Once we start having platforms like PlaceOS, but in other areas as well, so it's not just in our niche of smart buildings, then if all this data is normalized and well documented APIs, that the AI can actually do this across the board. it changes the way applications are built, and it changes computer science in such a breakthrough way that I don't think people realize unless they're in this space, because it's not, you don't see everyday examples of this, and a lot of this is running behind the scenes for many things,
Yeah.
including PlaceOS. We're integration platform, so we're often behind the scenes. Uh, but it's going to be pretty obvious when people come up with novel ideas on how to use this and apply it. And then once it happens more in that general consumer space, and people learn what they can do and what interesting companies are doing, it will then be transferred and applied to the niche industries such as smart buildings. And that's what's exciting about this as well. It's further convergence of our niche into more standard IT processes. And application processes. In some ways, it's leapfrogging. The building industry has always been slow to adopt technology. I think that's changing with AI because it's such a strong use case for AI in the first place. So people might, this industry might leapfrog and be leading in technology rather than running at building speeds. Which when you're designing a building 10 years before it's finished, it's just ingrained in the culture of the industry. So it's always been a hard problem to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening. I was just also looking for questions. And if you do have some, we've got about 4 minutes left. So any comments, questions, let us know. Anything that you want to ask John, now's the time. I had something for you, John. You mentioned ChatGPT. I assume, I think a lot of people have experimented with these kind of like commercial tools that you can, that have APIs and you can integrate into your existing products and services. Have you considered fine tuning like a base model, or even, I suppose it's sort of out of our reach at the moment, creating your own base model based on how much compute and expense it costs. But is that something that you guys, or you think that will be a natural like kind of evolution?
That's exactly our sort of medium-term plan with AI, and it's exactly what we're doing in collaboration with the university, where our philosophy, OS is in our brand name, and that could stand for open source and open standards, and so our philosophy is to contribute, and we're contributing to a shared model with the university. I can't talk too much about it because it's early days and there's NDAs and things like that, but we have access to so much data and can rapidly build new integration drivers for things outside of our core focus today, that we can play a strong role in contributing that data for training, and to work with researchers to fine-tune that data. And in fact, in the very near future, I was just talking before this session, my co-founder Steve and I recorded our own podcast on the topic of AI. And our topic this week was about open source AI and how some of these models in the very near future, you'll be able to download and use. But the missing piece when you use Facebook's open source AI model is it doesn't have Facebook's training data. So you'd have to be training your own models using their open source framework. So that training is obviously important, and any data focused company has a competitive advantage there.
Yeah. And I think the concept idea of open sourcing or creating a specific model for commercial buildings or built environment would be, would be awesome, especially, providing that as, let's say, a base model or for the industry could really speed up innovation. I think that's really exciting.
And I think there can be a shared model for multiple facets of the industry across transport, cities, parks, airports. There's a lot of common analytic requirements that the same base model can be used for different industry verticals and solutions. And that's what I like about collaborating with universities is we can build something very general that can then be applied specifically with industry partnerships.
Last chance, guys. If you do have a a couple of comments come in, but if there are any questions, let us know. One final thing for me, I've seen a little bit more pushback online, a bit more criticism about some of these models. You know, they've been hoovering up a lot of data, and you know, it's sort of a little bit murky, let's say, a little bit about, you know, where the line between what data they should be using and what data they shouldn't be using. I mean, have you had thoughts about that? What do you think that, you know, that as regulation catches up, or as perhaps lawsuits come and decisions are made, that we're going to see that change, more guide rails for how models are trained?
Yeah, I think some of the problem is AI for AI's sake, and people rushing to have some AI product or model or training with data they don't have the intellectual property to use. I think that's a big challenge. We're being very deliberate and careful on that, and focusing on outcomes first. So what outcome are we trying to achieve, and that can steer the methods, the models, and the training data we need, and then that can help us make decisions on what is the privacy impact if that happens to be the data we need. So if you just start collecting all the data, then obviously you could be collecting data that is a risk. And then so I think like most user experience design, you start with the outcome first, and that's certainly true with AI.
Good. All right. You mentioned your podcast. What's the name? Where can people find it?
I think we're calling it the AI Guys because Steve and I just get on and talk about AI constantly. But it will be on our website, PlaceOS.com.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's a good place for you guys to. 1 second. Have we got a question? Have we? Let's have a look. Where am I going for this? One second. Yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, okay. One question. Sorry, I missed this. I don't know why. I need to work on my.
It's like being a
my hosting skills here. One final question before we leave. What standard did you use, if any, to tag building data, such as a heat pump? Thanks for that question, Julian.
So we would be integrating with so we normalize the data coming into our own time series database, and the communication protocol is determined by the thing we're integrating with. So there's many protocols we support, from BACnet, KNX, etc. in the building ecosystem landscape. There's been many things with sort of the promise of standardizing the tagging of data, like BRIC and other schemas. So the short answer is it would be very specific, and we would design that for the particular integration. But then it comes into our time series database in a normalized way. So then it's a nice table that we can look up and expose to the large language models.
Good. All right. There's also a question here about contacting you, but you can see that in the chat later on, John, if you want to give that guy send you his contact details.
And I think you and I, James, are all over LinkedIn. We're pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. People are probably sick of seeing my talking head talking about AI.
Bored of us by now. Yeah, sure. Thanks very much, John. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks everyone for listening. And if you obviously reach out to John if you want to know more about what he does at PlaceOS, or if you want answer any questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, James.
Bye-bye for now.
All day.